Welcome to Restoring Men in History, the Second Amendment. We have some Charlie Kirk clips of him speaking about the Second Amendment. This is an amendment that is so important to our freedoms here in America. Bill of Rights, the U.S. Constitution, and today the Second Amendment, so important. And remember what we always say, Constitution protects you if we protect the Constitution lawfully and peacefully. So let's get into clip number one. Charlie Kirk, go.
We're going through a gun debate in our country right now, and I'm going to weigh right into it. And I think it's very important that we articulate why we have the Second Amendment. It's not for hunting, it's not for self-defense, it's for something much more important than that. The Second Amendment is the amendment that protects all the other amendments. Without the Second Amendment, there is no First Amendment, there is no Fourth Amendment. An armed citizenry that is able to protect themselves against despots and tyrants is essential to the protection of all the other liberties that we enjoy in our country.
Now, St. George Tucker said this may be considered as the true palladium of liberty. The right of self-defense is the first law of nature. So important, right? In most governments, it has been the study of rulers, get this, to confine this right within the narrowest limits possible, right? Wherever standing armies are kept up and the right of the people to keep and bear arms is, under any color or pretext whatsoever, prohibited, liberty, if not already annihilated, is on the brink of destruction. Pretty strong words from St. George Tucker. He wrote that in Blackstone's commentaries. If you like this subject, subscribe, like, and comment. If you want liberty, you need to have what? Armed citizens to prevent tyranny. Or look what's going over in England. How would you like to be living there right now? And I feel badly for the great citizens of England that are still living there. Founders wrote it in for your freedom. They knew citizens needed to be armed so they could protect themselves against despots and tyrants. That's why it was written in. Not for just hunting, not just for the Indians, so you could protect yourself. They didn't want it again, a king, a parliament, too strong of a centralized government. In fact, they wrote the whole Constitution, what? Separation of powers. They wrote the Bill of Rights, why? To restrain what? To restrain what group? To restrain the federal government. When they wrote the Bill of Rights, Virginia, George Mason had already written the Virginia Declaration of Rights in the state constitution of Virginia. It was already in there to protect having guns. Now, what is another way you can end up with a tyrant or despot? Incrementally, you let laws go by and you don't pay attention, and they slowly take away your freedoms. And they go way beyond the powers of the Constitution, which we have here. Look what happened in Australia. Look at America during COVID. Now imagine America during COVID without gun ownership. How far would they have gone? How about without a constitution, without federalism, without certain states pushing back? What would have happened during COVID? You lived through COVID. Some of you missed your prom. Some of you missed your high school graduation. Let's never forget it. The freedoms that were taken from you, the events in your life that were taken from you. And look how far the politicians and bureaucrats went. And we have gun ownership. All right, let's go on to the next clip. Go.
What is your stance on guns in terms of like gun control?
I'm very pro-Second Amendment.
So you believe, I'm assuming that like by making guns illegal, criminals are still going to get their hands on guns, correct?
Let me tell you my position, okay? The Second Amendment is there to protect all the other amendments against a potentially tyrannical government. If we act as if that has not happened in history, we're not even reading our 20th century history. I fully acknowledge and admit, when you allow gun ownership, you're going to have gun deaths. There is a cost to liberty. If you argue for Second Amendment rights and say that you're going to get gun deaths to zero, that is a falsehood. That is also why I support driving. I think driving is a moral good, but you're going to have people that die in auto fatalities. Liberty comes at a price, and so I believe that, yes, there will be costs and consequences of having firearm ownership, but the positives far outweigh the negatives.
Now, James Madison said what? What did he say? You don't even need the Bill of Rights. If it's not clearly enumerated in the Constitution, federal government can't do it. They even put the 10th Amendment in to make it clear. But we put the Bill of Rights in, and we put the Second Amendment in, and we still are fighting about it today. It restrained the federal government. Virginia already had it, as I said before. George Mason had already written it in back in 1776 in the Virginia State Constitution and Declaration of Rights for Virginia, before the Declaration of Independence. And think about how we're fighting over it today. And James Madison and other founders said, you don't even need it. If it's not enumerated in the Constitution, don't worry about it. Everything else belongs to the states. Federalist 45. What did Jefferson write? So that guy was saying, Kirk acknowledged, yes, criminals can still get their hands on guns, but what did Jefferson write? Quote, laws that forbid the carrying of arms disarm only those who are neither inclined nor determined to commit crimes, right? Such laws make things worse for the assaulted and better for the assailants, right? You take away guns from everybody except criminals, from law-abiding citizens, and you got a problem, right? They serve rather to encourage than prevent homicides. For an unarmed man may be attacked with greater confidence than an armed man. It's just common sense, right? But look at the debates we're having. Second Amendment is so important that we protect it, that we stand for it, that we fight for it lawfully and peacefully. And utopia, he goes into this, of course, there are going to be deaths, right? He talks about car deaths. You could talk about knife deaths. We don't live in a utopian world here. And that's the big difference between some people's philosophies and others, right? Some people believe you can create perfection here. We don't. I don't. I know we can't. So unfortunately, yes, some people are going to die. But if you look at the stats, actually, it's much less if you take out suicides in big crime cities. But again, there's a faction that thinks they can make it perfect here. And then again, there's a faction that just wants to use it for power, to take your ability to own guns away so you can't protect yourself against despots and tyrants. And that's the main part of this, right? You've got to be able to protect, because what have we seen happen? What has the federal government done through time? They've expanded their power, not decreased it, right? When's the last time the federal government decreased their powers? When is the last time the federal government said, we need to restore the Constitution and follow the 10th Amendment and follow it? And did it. Oh, 3, it protects all the other amendments and your freedom. True, so true. This Second Amendment, the Bill of Rights, the 10th Amendment, protects all your freedoms. And we just talked about it. The federal government's already gone beyond their enumerated powers. And who has done that? All 3 branches have done that. Both parties have done that. And the uniparty, if you want to call it that. They've gone beyond their powers, increasing the size and scope of the federal government. How are we going to roll it back? How are we going to restore it? How far would they have gone if there were no guns in America? And no state governments at all, no federalism at all. So another thing that concerns me about freedoms, and this is not the video for that, but are just digital IDs, a problem. We've talked about it way back. But look at England, digital ID coming. And then if you get a digital currency tied with a digital ID and then with a social credit score, you got problems, right? If you want to be able to go to the store and buy food and you don't follow what they say, you got tyrants telling you what to do, what you can buy, when and how and where. If you don't take this jab, if you don't do this, if you don't do this, you don't get food, right? You don't get ammo. So let's read the Second Amendment. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Tench Cox. So, the question you might ask yourself, who are the militia? Tench Cox answers that. Here he is. Who are the militia? Are they not ourselves? Is it feared then that we shall turn our arms each man against his own bosom? Congress have no power to disarm the militia. Their swords and every other terrible implement of the soldier are the birthright of an American great. Quote, love that. Is that fantastic or what? And very clear. George Mason said this. I asked, sir, what is the militia? Here he is. Eliot debates the Constitution. So this is George Mason. It is the whole people except for, get who he leaves out, few public officials. Very clear again. And again, these are just some of the founders. There's many. But they wrote it in. And you got the Second Amendment. It's in there. Richard Henry said this. Richard Henry Lee of Virginia, to preserve liberty, it is essential that the whole body of the people always possess arms and be taught alike, especially when young, how to use them. Another great book is Joyce Lee Malcolm. She talks about rights, keep and bear arms. Wonderful book. It's great, and it talks about the militia and how they defined it back in England way back. And they had men up to 60 going out in posses and things. She talks about that. We're not going to go into that here today. But think about the age difference today and lifespan. So it's the militia Who's the militia? It's the people. All ages. Let's go on to clip 3. Go.
Earlier you mentioned that all the amendments kind of depend on the second one, and my friends and I were talking, and we kind of felt like if the people were to rise up over the government, we don't really feel like our guns would be able to stand up against the U.S. military.
Yeah, we would. You'd be surprised. Let's take one example.
Right.
You guys might remember the Hong Kong protests a couple years ago. If they would have had firearms, it would have been a completely different situation. The Chinese Communist Party wouldn't have taken over Hong Kong if every one of them had an AR-15 strapped around their back. The number one way you look in the 20th century that the worst countries are able to take power, Nazi Germany, Soviet Union, Pol Pot, Mao's China, the first thing they did is they took the guns. Taking guns is the beginning of the end of the rest of your freedoms. So that's my answer.
Thank you.
Before a standing army can rule, the people must be disarmed, as they are in almost every kingdom of Europe. Look at Europe today, by the way. The supreme power in America cannot enforce unjust laws by the sword because, why? The whole body of the people are armed and constitute a force superior to any bands of regular troops that can be on any pretense raised in the United States. Noah Webster. So what does he talk about? He talks about Hitler, Mao, and we'll just sum this up. You can go research it. But Mao first armed the peasants, and then what did he do? To fight the nationalist forces, and then what did he do? Then it became what? What do these regimes usually do? They're like favoritism. In America, we have rule of law, not rule of man. So what do they do? What did the Nazis do? They create these laws, but the laws have to be enforced properly, right? And then the judges have to be judging correctly, right? So Mao first armed the peasants to fight against the national forces. Then when he came to power, what did he do? He favored control of who got the guns. Only his allies, not his enemies, could have guns, right? Hitler did the same thing, the Nazi Germany. And he said this: political power grows out of the barrel of a gun. That's Mao. Nazi Germany took the guns from their enemies through laws. It was that only for thee, not for me, right? So I'll just read one excerpt from the Gun Zone, Nick, Oetken, thegunzone.com, and you can read the whole piece if you want. But some of the German laws are in here. 1933 amendments to the 1928 law on firearms marked a critical turning point. While initially appearing to relax some restrictions lowering the age for rifle ownership, these amendments were selectively enforced. So you can write a law, but if there's no real law and it's not enforced correctly, what is it going to be? Rule of man. This law exempted Nazi party members from many restrictions, effectively arming them while simultaneously preparing to disarm their perceived enemies, right? So you can write laws if you enforce it incorrectly, or you can write a law directly to do that, which has been done as well. So usually what you'll see is their allies and friends can be armed, but not their enemies. This was achieved through a combination of regulatory changes and administrative practice, right? Rules for thee, but not for me, right? Patrick Henry said this: guard with jealous attention the public liberty. Suspect everyone who approaches that jewel. And we need to do that today, right? You need to watch on the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the 10th. And there's people on both sides of the aisle, right? Because people in power, it seems like in many cases, don't mind taking your rights away and liberties. And they've spent $37 trillion, so that's horrific. Suspect everyone who approaches that jewel. So when somebody's trying to curtail your rights, saying it's for your safety, like TikTok for your safety, sure. For the children, sure. No, I think it's to control narratives. Watch and beware of trying to go around the First Amendment and Second Amendment. Unfortunately, nothing will preserve it. This is still Patrick Henry, but downright force. Whenever you give up that force, you are ruined. Pretty strong words from Patrick Henry. He was fantastic too, Patrick Henry. The great object is that every man be armed. Everyone who is able might have a gun. Patrick Henry, speech to the Virginia Ratifying Convention, June 5th, 1778. Patrick Henry was fantastic. If you haven't read about him, pick up a biography on Patrick Henry. Great read. So it's up to us. And we need to remember what John Adams said. Let's read it. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. Morality and virtue are the foundation of our republic and necessary for a society to be free. So if we don't stand for it lawfully and peacefully, we won't have our freedoms. Who's it up to? It's up to us. If you like this subject, please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.